Hi everyone, here's the Bookchemist once again, and this week I finally got round to reading some of M.R. James' ghost stories, and I can finally see what all the fuss is about. The guy is definitely a master of the genre, and I love these stories so much. Knowing about M.R. James' figure, knowing about this writer from the late 19th, early 20th century, knowing of how he was critical of H.P. Lovecraft and of Bram Stoker, that he was a Cambridge dean and he was the provost or dean or boss or whatever of Eton, Eton, that posh school in England. I imagined a very tame writer, a very balanced one, maybe with some hints of sinister stuff here and there. No, he is fucking terrifying. His stories are definitely very strong stuff, even rather physical when it comes to it. The kind of stuff where I'm a grown man and these stories traveled 100 years from the past and they still managed to terrify me. And when I woke up last night, I had to go to the toilet. I lit up all the lights in every room to make sure there were no demons around. If you want a better analysis of why M.R. James' stories are so effective and so innovative and so original, even in terms of style, in terms of narrative structure and devices, I highly recommend you read Michael Chabon's essay The Other James, which is collected in Maps and Legends, his book. I can tell you that the reason I think M.R. James' stories are so fascinating, and the reason you should read them, even if you have just a passing interest in horror, is that he manages to balance so many different styles and so many different vibes in the course of very short, very intense stories. He is actually lots of fun, and there's some hilarious jokes here and there, especially when it comes to golf. He had some problem with golf for whatever reason, and he also manages to convey maybe here and there in the span of a couple paragraphs a note of some sinister foreboding, and then you're back to the hilarious stuff and you're back to very mundane business. And then all of a sudden, before you can even realize it, the horror strikes, and it's very strong, and as I said, it's actually very terrifying and moving, and all the stronger because you weren't expecting it, because you're in this, he builds this aura of normalcy and this aura of skepticism, and then does a hell of a good job at shattering it in the span of a paragraph. I've said these stories are very short, but every word counts, even when he's telling you about the common life and the daily habits of these people. Those words too count. They build this beautiful atmosphere, and don't think that there's too much of that superfluous stuff going on. Actually, he is very direct in cutting the bullshit. Sometimes he will tell you, this one character said something, or these guys went and played golf, but I'm not going to tell you about that because that's not the point of the story. And that's something I always love in fiction, when writers do that. There's a beautiful chapter in The Betrothed by Alessandro Manzoni, Promessi Sposi, very famous historical novel in Italy, where he says the next chapter is going to talk about the dressing habits of the 17th century, so if you're not interested, skip it to the next bit, which has action in it, and I love that. M.R. James, going back to him, he definitely cuts the bullshit, and he mixes these beautiful styles so masterfully. The common comparison that is drawn is with H.P. Lovecraft, probably because he is the most famous writer from that early age of modern horror. I do believe that the comparison sort of makes sense, but I also believe that there's a basic difference between the two writers' styles, which I can only articulate by talking of heavy metal music. The way I think of it is that H.P. Lovecraft is like Metallica or like Slayer, whereas M.R. James is more like Megadeth or Anthrax. Moving outside that very narrow musical genre, I can probably say Lovecraft is like the Rolling Stones and James is like the Beatles, but it doesn't work the same way when I talk about that. What I mean to say is that H.P. Lovecraft is masterful. He is very much my favorite writer. He is a genius at what he does. If his fiction conveys what it wants to convey, as well as no other writer I've so far read, and he is so good at conveying his cosmic horror and the meaninglessness of life and the horrors and the scary nature and the disturbing nature of these bizarre aliens from outer space, but he is very much a writer with a single message at its heart. just like the music of Metallica and Slayer has some nuance, but it's all about rage. I'm talking about their golden age, I'm talking about their 80s records. It's all about rage. Some of you will mention Sweet Ermengarde and those other written experiments by Lovecraft, but those are minor things and I'm going to ignore them. Whereas James also has horror at its core. People, Megadeth, Anthrax also have that core of rage in their music, but they also play much more with their style. Their style is so much more colorful. There's irony in their music, and there's more overt political tones, and there's more variety, and you find these slower, more sinister songs alternated with very fast thrash metal anthems. Just as in M.R. James, you find the more straightforwardly terrifying stories, and those that play a little bit more with humor, and those that play a little bit more with setting and atmosphere. This is not meant to be at all a comparison between all the writers and bands I've mentioned. I just want to say that if you like any of this stuff, you should probably read and enjoy the rest of it. And if you have an interest in horror fiction, by all means read M.R. James. Do not be afraid that it's going to be too outdated or too tame or too old for your taste. Just be afraid that you're going to be actually fucking terrified by his short stories. If you want to begin with one or two, I would recommend Canon Alberic's scrapbook, Lost Hearts, and Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You My Lad. I'll find and I look for online versions of them, and if I can find them I'll put links to them in the comment section below. Thank you as always for watching. Let me know about your experience with M.R. James and about your favorite James stories in the comments below. In a second I'll put links on the screen to a video I filmed on Clark Ashton Smith, another master of horror and also largely science fiction, fantasy fiction from the early 20th century, and to a video I filmed on The Tomb by H.P. Lovecraft. That story I adore to bits. And thanks for watching once more. Bye guys.